Imagine a world where the moment you're born, your entire life is already written, not by your dreams or ambitions, but by the blood in your veins, the land you're born on, and the name you carry. This was the reality of medieval Europe, a place where your birth determined whether you'd feast in a castle or toil in the fields until your last breath. Let's step into this world, a world of ironclad rules and unbreakable hierarchies, where one truth reigns supreme. Your identity at birth shaped your destiny. Picture a boy named Edric, born in a muddy village in 12th century England. His mother is a serf, his father a laborer bound to the Lord's land. From the cradle, Edric's life is mapped out. He'll work the fields, pay taxes he can barely afford, and never leave the village without his lord's permission. He dreams of becoming a knight, of riding into battle with a shining sword, but that dream is as distant as the stars. Why? Because in the Middle Ages, the feudal system locked people into their place. Kings ruled by divine right, nobles held vast estates, knights fought for glory, priests prayed for souls, and serfs like Edric, they worked. They always worked. The feudal system was the backbone of medieval Europe, stretching from the fall of Rome in the 5th century to the dawn of the Renaissance in the 15th. It was a pyramid of power, with the king at the top, divinely ordained, or so the church claimed. Below him were the nobles, dukes, barons, and lords, who owned the land and the people on it. Knights served the nobles, trading military service for status. At the bottom, the vast majority, serfs and peasants, labored to keep the whole system running. This wasn't just a social order. It was a way of life, cemented by law, custom, and religion. Edric's story isn't unique. Millions lived like him, their fates sealed by birth. Social mobility, the idea of climbing the ladder through hard work or talent, was a fantasy for most. The system was designed to keep everyone in their place. A serf couldn't become a knight any more than a pig could become a horse. The law bound serfs to the land. They couldn't leave without permission, and even if they could, where would they go? The church reinforced this, preaching that God had placed everyone in their station for a reason. To question your lot was to question divine will. But why was this system so rigid? It came down to survival. In a world of constant war, famine, and disease, stability was everything. The feudal system promised order. Nobles provided protection, serfs provided food, and the church provided salvation. Everyone had a role, and stepping outside it threatened the whole structure. A serf who left the land could starve the village. A noble who defied the king could spark a rebellion. The system worked because everyone was locked in, whether they liked it or not. Let's walk through Edric's village to see this in action. It's dawn, and the air is thick with the smell of damp earth and livestock. Edric, barely 12, is already in the fields, pulling weeds under the watchful eye of the Lord's bailiff. His family's hut is a single room of wattle and daub, shared with his parents and 4 siblings. Their meals are simple: pottage, a watery stew of grains, and whatever vegetables they can grow. Meat is a rare luxury, maybe tasted once a year at a festival. Edric's father owes the Lord 3 days of labor a week, plus a portion of their crops as rent. Then there's the tithe, a tenth of their harvest given to the church. What's left barely keeps them alive. Edric's heard stories of knights and kings, of grand tournaments and battles. He once saw a knight ride through the village, his armor gleaming, his horse towering over the muddy paths. For a moment, Edric imagined himself in that armor, but the bailiff laughed when he mentioned it. "You, a knight? Know your place, boy." And that's the truth of it. Knighthood requires training, wealth, and noble blood, none of which Edric has. His life is the plough, the harvest, the endless cycle of labor. This wasn't just Edric's story. It was the story of millions across England, France, Germany, and beyond. The feudal system varied slightly by region, but the core was the same. Your birth decided your path. In some places, like France, serfs could buy their freedom, but the cost was astronomical, and few ever managed it. In England, after the Norman conquest of 1066, the system tightened even further. William the Conqueror divided the land among his loyal nobles, creating a web of loyalty and obligation that left no room for ambition from below. The rigidity wasn't just practical, it was ideological. The Church, the most powerful institution in Europe, preached that society was like a body. The king was the head, nobles the arms, and serfs the feet. Each part had its purpose, and to disrupt it was to defy God. This idea, called the Great Chain of Being, was taught in churches and monasteries, etched into the minds of rich and poor alike. For someone like Edric, it meant accepting his place, no matter how brutal. But what was life like at the top of this pyramid? If Edric's world was one of mud and toil, what awaited those born into privilege? To understand the full scope of this truth, we need to step out of the fields and into the towering stone walls of a noble's castle, where a very different kind of life unfolded. As we turn our gaze away from Edric laboring in the muddy fields to the other end of the social spectrum, we encounter the noble class. These individuals, born into privilege, lived lives that stood in stark contrast to Edric's, as different as day and night. In medieval Europe, nobles were the landowners, rulers, and elite. Dukes, earls, barons, and knights who possessed vast estates, commanded armies, and resided in castles that symbolized their power. Their lives were filled with luxury, influence, and an inherent sense of responsibility. Imagine stepping into the great hall of a noble castle at dawn. Unlike Edric, who would already be toiling in the fields, a noble might be leisurely enjoying breakfast. The great hall was the heart of the castle, with high ceilings adorned with exquisite tapestries, a roaring fire in the hearth, and tables laden with roasted boar, venison, cheese, fresh bread, and wine imported from distant lands. These foods, which would be unimaginable luxuries for common folk, were everyday fare for the nobility. Their clothing was made of silk and velvet, embedded with precious stones, forming a sharp contrast to the rough woolen garments worn by Edric's family. The nobles' diet and attire served not only to meet their needs, but to demonstrate their elevated status. After breakfast, nobles would begin attending to their affairs. As lords of the manor, they were responsible for managing their estates, overseeing their stewards' work, and ensuring the success of their harvests. They might need to listen to disputes between tenants, arbitrate conflicts, or plan the following year's planting and harvesting. Despite their wealth, nobles were far from idle. They served as administrators, judges, and protectors of their domains, bearing the heavy responsibility of maintaining order within their territories. Their power stemmed from land ownership, and through the feudal system, They established relationships of loyalty with the king or other higher-ranking nobles. Land was the foundation of wealth and power, and nobles maintained their lifestyle through collecting rent, taxes, and labor services from their serfs. But noble life extended far beyond duty. They had time to enjoy pursuits that were beyond the reach of ordinary people. Hunting was one of the nobles' favorite activities. Riding with hounds to chase deer or wild boar not only demonstrated skill and courage, but also displayed wealth. Falconry was another refined entertainment, where nobles trained birds of prey to catch small animals, showcasing their patience and status. Tournaments were grand social occasions where knights competed on horseback, vying for honor and prizes. These activities were not merely entertainment, but stages for nobles to display their power and identity, attracting spectators from far and wide. Noble women also had their own roles and pastimes. They were responsible for managing household affairs, supervising servants, and ensuring the smooth operation of the castle. When their husbands were away, they might take over estate management. Noble women also needed to educate their children, teaching them etiquette and cultural skills. They were skilled in playing instruments like the harp or lute, excelled in singing, dancing, and embroidery. Skills that were not only pastimes but symbols that enhanced their family's reputation. Noble women demonstrated their family's wealth and hospitality by hosting banquets and entertaining guests. Let us contrast this with Edric's life. While Edric labored in the fields from dawn to dusk, a noble might spend the afternoon hunting or attending feasts. Where the noble wore magnificent silks, Edric wore rough wool. The noble's home was a stone castle complete with towers and moats, while Edric's was a mud hut shared with livestock. The noble's life was filled with comfort and security, while serfs struggled in poverty and hardship. However, noble life was not entirely about pleasure. They owed obligations to the king or higher-ranking nobles, having to provide knights and soldiers for wars or defense. Sometimes they could pay shield money instead of personal service, but this was also a considerable expense. Additionally, nobles were expected to provide hospitality for visiting royalty or nobility, which could be enormously costly. Their wealth and status came with responsibilities, following the code of chivalry that emphasized honor, loyalty, and service. A historical case vividly illustrates noble power and lifestyle. In 1066, after William I's victory at the Battle of Hastings, he distributed English lands to his loyal Norman followers. These newly elevated nobles built castles, consolidated their rule, and lived luxuriously, while the conquered Anglo-Saxons were reduced to the bottom of society. Another example is Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women in medieval times. As Duchess of Aquitaine, through her marriages to French King Louis VII and English King Henry II, she brought enormous wealth and territory. Her life was filled with political intrigue, cultural patronage, and unparalleled influence, standing in stark contrast to the suffering of serfs. Noble status was not merely a manifestation of wealth, but part of a divine order. The Church preached that society was like a body, with the king as the head, nobles as the arms, and serfs as the feet. This concept, known as the Great Chain of Being, was deeply ingrained, teaching people to accept their position. Rebellion was seen as defying God's will. This belief reinforced the nobles' privileged position, making their power unshakable. As we continue exploring medieval society, we will turn to another key player, the Church. How did it consolidate social order through doctrine? And how did it benefit from this arrangement? Imagine waking up every day knowing that your life is not your own, that the land you till is not yours, and that your fate is sealed by the accident of your birth. This was the reality for millions of serfs in medieval Europe, whose lives were bound to the soil and subject to the whims of their lords. While the nobility reveled in luxury and power, serfs toiled in the shadows, their existence defined by relentless labor, economic hardship, and a lack of personal freedom. Let's step into their world, a world of mud, sweat, and unyielding obligation, to understand the harsh truth of serfdom. Picture a serf named Edric, whom we met earlier, rising before dawn in his small village in 12th century England. His family's hut is a cramped, drafty structure of wattle and daub, shared with his parents, siblings, and a few chickens. The air smells of damp earth and livestock, and the day's work awaits. Edric's life, like that of millions across Europe, is dictated by the feudal system, where serfs formed the lowest rung of society, bound to the land they worked and the lord who owned it. Serfdom, a condition of debt bondage, emerged after the collapse of the Carolingian Empire around the 10th century, as powerful lords sought reliable agricultural labor. Unlike slaves, serfs were tied to hereditary plots and could not be bought or sold individually, but their freedoms were so limited that the distinction often felt academic. Each morning, Edric heads to the fields, his calloused hands gripping a wooden plough. His work is divided between his family's small plot, where they grow barley and vegetables for survival, and the Lord's domain, the land reserved for the Lord's profit. This could mean ploughing fields, harvesting crops, digging ditches, repairing fences, or even hauling wood for the manor house. Historical records suggest that serfs typically spent several days a week laboring for the Lord, with the rest devoted to their own subsistence. During the harvest season, the entire family, Edric, his parents, and even his younger siblings, worked from dawn to dusk to ensure the Lord's crops were gathered first. The physical toll was immense, with long hours under the sun or in biting cold, leaving little time for rest. The economic burdens on serfs were relentless. They paid taxes not in coin, which was scarce, but in kind, offering the best of their produce to the Lord. Edric's family might surrender a portion of their wheat, a dozen eggs at Easter, or a goose at Christmas. Arbitrary taxes added to their woes. Some lords demanded a chicken test, where a bird had to jump a fence to prove its tax-worthiness. Upon a family member's death, a feudal relief tax could strip them of precious resources. These obligations, documented in manorial records, often left serfs with barely enough to survive. A bad harvest could mean starvation, and 2 bad harvests almost guaranteed it. Edric's family subsisted on pottage, a watery stew of grains and whatever vegetables they could grow, with meat a rare treat, perhaps tasted once a year at a village festival. Despite their hardships, serfs were not slaves in the strictest sense. They had certain rights, though these were tightly controlled. They could cultivate designated fields, gather deadwood for fuel, and keep a few animals, but only with the Lord's permission. The Lord was expected to protect them from bandits and provide aid during famines, enforceable in the manorial court, but such protections were often more theoretical than real. Serfs were forbidden from leaving the manor without permission, a restriction that bound them to the land as surely as chains. Marrying someone from another manor required the lord's consent and often a fee, and hunting or trapping game on the lord's land was strictly prohibited, reserving such privileges for the nobility. Yet, there were rare paths to freedom. A lord might grant manumission for exceptional service, or a wealthy serf could buy enfranchisement. Some, like those in England who escaped to a chartered town and remained there for a year and a day, could become burghers, though this meant abandoning their land and facing an uncertain future. In the feudal hierarchy, serfs were the foundation, supporting everyone above them. The church justified this order, preaching that serfs worked for all, knights fought for all, and churchmen prayed for all. This ideology, known as the Great Chain of Being, ensured that serfs accepted their place as divinely ordained, though it offered little comfort. Unlike slaves, serfs could accumulate personal property, and some even amassed enough wealth to improve their lot. But social mobility was a distant dream for most. Edric, for instance, could only watch as knights rode through his village, their armor gleaming, knowing such a life was beyond his reach. The experience of serfdom varied across Europe. In Poland, labor demands grew over time, from a few days per year in the 13th century to 6 days a week by the 18th century, according to historical studies. In some regions, serfs could serve as soldiers, earning freedom or even ennoblement through valor, though such cases were rare. In England, the possibility of becoming a burgher offered a slim chance of escape, but it came at the cost of leaving everything behind. These variations highlight the diversity of serfdom, but the core truth remained. Serfs were bound to the land and their lords, with little control over their destinies. The harshness of serfdom sparked occasional resistance. In 1381, England's Peasants' Revolt saw serfs and peasants rise against oppressive taxes and demand an end to serfdom. Though the revolt was crushed, it revealed the simmering discontent beneath the surface. The Black Death of 1347 was a turning point in Western Europe, killing up to half the population and creating a labor shortage. Serfs could demand better terms, and some fled to towns for freedom. By the late 14th century, paid laborers began replacing serfs in the West, though in Central and Eastern Europe, a second serfdom emerged with harsher conditions. Abolition came gradually. France in 1789, the Austrian Empire in 1781, Prussia after 1807, and Russia in 1861. These changes marked the end of a system that had defined lives like Edric's for centuries. As we reflect on the lives of serfs, we see a world of unyielding hardship, where birth locked millions into a cycle of labor and submission. Yet, their resilience and rare acts of defiance laid the groundwork for change. How did the Church, with its vast influence, shape this rigid order? Did it merely uphold the status quo, or did it offer a path to challenge it? Let's explore the role of religion in binding and, at times, breaking these chains. In the tapestry of medieval Europe, the Catholic Church stood as a towering institution, its influence woven into every facet of life. From soaring cathedrals to humble village churches, its presence was inescapable, guiding not only the souls of the faithful, but also the very structure of society. Beyond its spiritual mission, the Church played a pivotal role in cementing the rigid social hierarchy that defined the Middle Ages. Through its teachings, control over knowledge, and alliances with the powerful, the Church ensured that each person remained firmly in their divinely appointed place. Picture a bustling medieval town, where the church bell tolls, calling the faithful to prayer. The local parish priest, clad in simple robes, delivers a sermon to a crowd of serfs, knights, and merchants. His message is clear. God has ordained a specific order for the world. Kings rule by divine right, nobles govern the land, knights protect it, and serfs labor to sustain it all. This idea, known as the Great Chain of Being, was the Church's cornerstone doctrine, suggesting that every creature, from the humblest insect to the mightiest angel, had a fixed place in God's plan. In human society, this translated to a strict hierarchy: kings and nobles at the top, clergy just below, followed by knights, and at the bottom, the vast majority, serfs and peasants like Edric, toiling in the fields. This doctrine was no mere theological concept. It was a powerful tool for social control. Through sermons, religious texts, and vivid artwork in churches, the Church embedded this ideology into the medieval mind. For nobles, it justified their wealth and power as God-given. For serfs, it offered a bittersweet promise: endure your hardships now, and salvation awaits in the afterlife. To challenge one's station was to defy God himself, a sin that could lead to excommunication, a fate feared more than death, as it severed one's connection to the Church and, by extension, to eternal salvation. The Church further reinforced this order by dividing society into three estates: the labrators, those who work; the bellators, those who fight; and the orators, those who pray. This tripartite model placed the clergy at the apex, as spiritual guides whose prayers sanctified the labor and warfare of others, ensuring the entire system was seen as divinely ordained. The Church's own structure mirrored this societal divide, with its clergy living lives that ranged from opulent to austere. At the top were the Pope, cardinals, bishops, and abbots of wealthy monasteries, who rivaled nobles in their grandeur. Bishops often resided in lavish palaces, their tables laden with fine foods and wines, their robes adorned with gold and jewels. Their wealth stemmed from vast church landholdings. By some estimates, the Church owned up to a third of Europe's land, bolstered by tithes, a mandatory 10% tax on all Christians, and donations from nobles seeking divine favor. These high-ranking clergy were often born into noble families, their appointments secured through wealth or connections, further intertwining the Church with the aristocracy. In stark contrast, rural parish priests and monks in smaller monasteries led lives closer to those of the common people. A village priest, like the one in Edric's hamlet, might live in a modest hut, relying on meager tithes from impoverished serfs. His duties included saying Mass, hearing confessions, and recording village births and deaths, often making him the only literate person in the community. Monks in less affluent monasteries spent their days in prayer, study, and manual labor, such as copying manuscripts or tending gardens. This disparity within the clergy reflected the broader social hierarchy. The higher clergy shared the nobility's lifestyle, while the lower clergy were tied to the struggles of the masses. Yet, even these humble priests wielded authority, as their role as spiritual mediators gave them influence over their flocks. Clerical celibacy, mandated by the Church, further set them apart, enhancing their perceived holiness by freeing them from worldly ties like family, thus reinforcing their dominance over the laity. The Church's power extended far beyond the pulpit, reaching into the political arena, where it often clashed with secular rulers. Its spiritual authority, backed by the threat of excommunication, gave it leverage over even the mightiest kings. A striking example is the conflict between King Henry II of England and Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Henry, seeking to curb the Church's influence, wanted clergy who committed crimes to face royal courts rather than ecclesiastical ones, which often issued lenient punishments. Becket, once Henry's trusted friend and chancellor, fiercely defended the Church's autonomy. The dispute escalated, with Becket excommunicating Henry's allies, prompting the king's infamous outburst, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" In 1170, 4 knights took this as a command, murdering Becket in Canterbury Cathedral. His martyrdom shocked Europe, turning him into a saint and forcing Henry to perform public penance, walking barefoot to Canterbury and enduring a flogging. This clash demonstrated the Church's ability to challenge royal authority, reinforcing its position as a supreme power that upheld the social order. Another pivotal conflict was the investiture controversy of the 11th century, pitting Pope Gregory VII against Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV. At issue was who had the right to appoint bishops, the Pope or the Emperor. When Gregory asserted papal supremacy, Henry declared him deposed, only to be excommunicated in return. Facing rebellion from his nobles, Henry was forced to seek forgiveness, standing barefoot in the snow at Canossa in 1077, a humiliating act that underscored the Church's dominance. These power struggles showed that the Church was not just a spiritual institution but a political force, capable of shaping the hierarchy by aligning with or challenging secular rulers. The Church also reinforced social divisions through its control over education and knowledge. Most schools were ecclesiastical, run by monasteries or cathedrals, and focused on training future clergy in Latin, scripture, and theology. This ensured that the Church's teachings, including the divine order, were perpetuated across generations. Monks preserved ancient texts, copying works of Aristotle and Cicero alongside religious manuscripts, but access to this knowledge was largely restricted to the elite. For the common people, the Church's message was delivered through sermons and stained glass windows, which vividly depicted the rewards of obedience and the torments of defiance. The Catholic Church, then, was far more than a religious institution. It was a pillar of the medieval social order. Its teachings sanctified the hierarchy, its clergy mirrored societal divides, and its political power ensured compliance. Yet, this system was not without tension. The Church's wealth and influence sparked resentment, and its conflicts with monarchs hinted at cracks in its authority. As we turn our gaze to those who fought to protect this order, we find another group bound by birth and duty. The knights, whose lives of glory and sacrifice reveal yet another facet of this unyielding hierarchy. While the Church provided the spiritual backbone of medieval society, it was the knights who embodied its physical strength. These warriors, clad in shining armor, were the enforcers of the feudal order, protecting the lands of their lords and fighting in their name. But becoming a knight was not a path open to all. It was largely reserved for those born into the nobility or those who showed exceptional promise from a young age. Let's step into their world, a world of honor, duty, and unrelenting danger, to see how even these celebrated warriors were shaped by the unyielding truth of their birth. Imagine a young boy named Geoffrey, born to a noble family in 12th century France. Unlike Edric, the serf we met earlier, Geoffrey's life is not one of endless toil in the fields. Instead, his destiny is to become a knight, a role that has been mapped out for him since birth. At the age of 7, Geoffrey is sent to another lord's castle to serve as a page. There, he learns the basics of combat, horsemanship, and courtly manners. He trains with wooden swords, practices archery, and studies the art of falconry. But his education is not just physical. He is also taught the virtues of chivalry, honor, loyalty, and courtesy, qualities that will define him as a knight. By his teenage years, Geoffrey becomes a squire, assisting a knight in battle and continuing his training. He helps his knight don his armor, cares for his weapons, and accompanies him into combat. The life of a squire is grueling, filled with long hours of practice and service, but it is also a path of opportunity. After years of proving his worth, Geoffrey will be dubbed a knight in a ceremony that is as much religious as it is martial. Kneeling before his lord, he receives the accolade, a light tap on the shoulder with a sword, symbolizing his entry into the ranks of knighthood. It is a moment of triumph, but also a solemn vow to uphold the code of chivalry. Knights were not just fighters. They were expected to live by a code that set them apart from other warriors. Chivalry emphasized honor, bravery, and loyalty to one's lord. A knight was to protect the weak, defend the church, and serve his lord with unwavering fidelity. But like all human endeavors, the reality often fell short of the ideal. Knights could be brutal, their loyalty swayed by wealth or power, and their actions sometimes driven by personal ambition rather than noble ideals. Still, the code of chivalry was a powerful symbol, shaping how knights saw themselves and how they were perceived by others. The life of a knight was one of both glory and danger. They fought in battles to defend their lord's lands, participated in tournaments to showcase their skills, and sometimes traveled great distances to join grand campaigns. Tournaments were grand spectacles, where knights competed in justs and melees, risking injury or death for fame and prizes. These events were not just tests of skill but also social gatherings, where knights could display their prowess and attract the attention of powerful lords or wealthy patrons. Beyond tournaments, knights were called to war, defending their lord's territory or expanding it through conquest. The risks were high. Battle wounds, capture, or death were ever-present threats, but so were the rewards, as a successful knight could gain land, wealth, or favor. One such campaign that drew knights from across Europe was the Crusades, those holy wars aimed at reclaiming Jerusalem from Muslim control. For many knights, the Crusades were an opportunity to gain honor, wealth, and spiritual merit. The Church promised indulgences, forgiveness of sins, for those who took up the cross, making the Crusades a path to both earthly and heavenly rewards. Knights like those who joined the First Crusade in 1096 faced grueling journeys, battling not only enemies but also disease, starvation, and harsh climates. Many never returned, their dreams of glory ending in distant battlefields. Yet, for those who survived, the Crusades could bring land, titles, or fame, reinforcing their status within the feudal hierarchy. Let's consider the story of Sir William Marshall, often regarded as the greatest knight of the 12th century. Born into a minor noble family in England, Marshall rose through the ranks through his skill and valor. He fought in countless tournaments, earning fame and fortune, and served 4 English kings, eventually becoming regent during the minority of King Henry III. His life is a rare example of social mobility in the medieval world, as he climbed from a relatively modest background to one of the most powerful men in England. But even Marshall's story understands the limits of that mobility. His noble birth gave him access to opportunities that someone like Edric could never dream of. Without that initial advantage, his legendary career would have been impossible. Knights also played a critical role in maintaining the feudal order. They were the muscle behind the nobility's power, enforcing their lord's will and protecting their lands from rivals or invaders. In return, knights received land, known as a fief, which provided them with income and status. This system of mutual obligation tied knights to their lords, reinforcing the hierarchy that kept society in place. A knight's loyalty was expected to be absolute, and betrayal could mean loss of land, honor, or even life. Yet, within this rigid structure, knights had some room to carve out their own legacy, whether through heroic deeds or strategic alliances. Despite their elevated status, knights were not immune to the dangers of their profession. Armor, while protective, was heavy and cumbersome, and battles were chaotic and brutal. A single misstep could lead to a lance through the chest or a fall from a horse, ending a knight's career, or life, in an instant. Tournaments, though less deadly than war, still carried risks, with knights suffering broken bones or worse. The physical toll was matched by the financial burden. Maintaining horses, armor, and weapons was costly, and many knights relied on their lord's support or tournament winnings to sustain their lifestyle. Yet, for all their glory, knights were still bound by the same rigid social structure that defined medieval Europe. Their status was largely determined by birth, and while they could achieve great fame and fortune, they could not escape the expectations and duties that came with their rank. A knight's life was one of service, to his lord, to his king, and to God. He was expected to fight, to lead, and to die if necessary, all in the name of maintaining the feudal order. In this way, even the mighty knights were not free from the chains of their birth. As we continue our journey through this harsh and unyielding world, we must also consider those who bore the double burden of both class and gender. Women in medieval society, whether noble or serf, faced unique challenges and limitations, their lives shaped not only by their birth, but also by the expectations placed upon them as women. Let's turn our gaze to their stories next, to see how they navigated a world that often seemed designed to confine them. Imagine two women in 12th century Europe, their lives as different as the earth and the sky. One is Lady Isabella, a noblewoman draped in silks, residing in a stone castle, her days spent overseeing servants and negotiating marriage alliances. The other is Matilda, a peasant woman, her hands rough from ploughing fields, her life a relentless cycle of labor to feed her family and satisfy her lord's demands. Both are bound by the unyielding chains of birth and gender, their paths set by the rigid hierarchy of medieval society. Let's step into their world to explore how class and gender shaped women's lives, from the privileged yet constrained noblewomen to the toiling peasant majority, and the rare few who defied their prescribed roles. Picture Matilda, rising before dawn in a cramped, drafty hut in a small English village. The air smells of damp straw and livestock as she prepares a meager breakfast of pottage for her husband and children. By sunrise, she's in the fields, weeding barley or harvesting wheat alongside the men. Her work doesn't end there. She spins wool, brews ale, and tends to her children, all while ensuring the lord's taxes are paid in grain or livestock. Peasant women like Matilda, who made up about 90% of Europe's population, were the backbone of the medieval economy. Yet, their labor was undervalued, with wages often half those of men, and their rights were limited. They could own small plots or inherit land in rare cases, but their social status was tied to their male relatives, fathers, husbands, or brothers. Despite these hardships, peasant women found ways to assert their agency. Some became skilled in trades like brewing or weaving, which provided extra income and a degree of independence. Others served as midwives or healers, using knowledge of herbs to treat ailments, earning respect in their communities. In towns, some peasant women sought better opportunities, working as servants, laundresses, or in textile production. However, urban life brought its own challenges, with low wages and exploitation common. For some, economic desperation led to prostitution, a grim necessity to survive in a world that offered few options. Matilda's life, whether in village or town, was one of resilience, her contributions vital yet often invisible in the shadow of the feudal order. Throughout medieval Europe, the social hierarchy stood like an impregnable fortress, firmly locking each person's destiny at the moment of their birth. Kings ruled, nobles administered, knights fought, and serfs toiled. This order was considered sacred and inviolable. However, within this seemingly immutable system, a few individuals, through extraordinary courage, wisdom, or opportunity, broke free from the shackles of their origins. Their stories, though rare, shine like starlight, revealing that social barriers were not entirely insurmountable. Let us enter their world and explore how they challenged medieval ironclad rules through military achievements, religious devotion, or unique talents. In war-torn medieval times, the military sphere provided opportunities for a few to transcend birth limitations, though this path was fraught with danger and slim chances. Knights were typically born into noble families, but through exceptional military talent, some managed to elevate their status. Take Richard Neville, nicknamed the Kingmaker Earl of Warwick, who was born into a knight's family of modest standing. However, through strategic marriages and political acumen during the Wars of the Roses, he became one of the most powerful figures in 15th century England. Neville not only commanded armies, but also influenced the succession of kings by supporting both the House of York and the House of Lancaster. His rise demonstrated how military talent and political wisdom could change fate during turbulent times. Another example is William I, the famous conqueror. Although he possessed noble blood as the illegitimate son of the Duke of Normandy, his origins were unstable, facing disputes over inheritance rights. In 1066, he conquered England at the Battle of Hastings, transforming from a disputed duke into a king and establishing a new ruling class. His story shows that military conquest could reshape social hierarchies, though such opportunities were limited to very few. The church was another realm that provided avenues for social advancement for those of humble birth, though such opportunities were equally scarce. Brother Lawrence, originally named Nicholas Herman, was born into a peasant family in the Lorraine region of France. He joined the army in his youth, seeking a stable life, but ultimately chose to enter the Carmelite order as a monk. His simple yet profound spiritual practice, recorded in The Practice of the Presence of God, made him an influential mystic. His story demonstrates that even those of peasant origin could achieve spiritual elevation through religious devotion. The rise of mendicant orders in the 13th century further opened doors for those from lower social strata. Orders like the Franciscans and Dominicans emphasized poverty and preaching, attracting those seeking to return to the simple life of early Christianity. These orders provided education and advancement opportunities for those of humble birth, allowing them to gain respect within the church through talent and devotion. Some even became bishops or religious leaders, proving that the church could serve as a bridge for social mobility, though such cases were extremely rare. Women faced even greater difficulty in breaking free from birth limitations under the dual constraints of class and gender. However, a few women left their mark on history through extraordinary efforts. Christine de Pizan serves as a typical example. In 1364, after her husband's death, she relied on writing to support her family, becoming one of Europe's earliest professional female writers. Her work, The Book of the City of Ladies, defended women's wisdom and value, challenging the gender discriminatory concepts of the time. Her success stemmed not only from talent, but also from her persistence in the cultural sphere, proving that women could gain recognition in intellectual fields. Margery Kempe was another woman who broke with tradition. Coming from a wealthy merchant family, she created The Book of Margery Kempe through oral dictation, the first autobiography in English literature. Her mystical faith and public expression of religious fervor led to multiple conflicts with church authorities, but her persistence secured her a place in religious and literary history. Joan of Arc is perhaps the most famous example. Born in 1412 to a peasant family in Domremy, France, she claimed to have received divine revelation and led French armies to victory in the 100 Years' War. At 17, she convinced Charles VII to grant her command of the army, turning the tide of war. However, her gender and origins made her a target of heresy charges, ultimately leading to her execution by fire in 1431. Her story demonstrates how women could challenge social norms under extreme circumstances, but also reveals the enormous price of such breakthroughs. In extremely rare cases, people of lower birth ascended to ruling positions through conquest or political maneuvering. Clovis I serves as such an example. As a leader of Frankish tribes, he unified various tribes in the late 5th century and established the foundation of the Frankish kingdom through his conversion to Christianity. His rise from tribal chief to Christian king demonstrated how military conquest and religious strategy could confer legitimacy and power. These stories of breaking birth limitations typically occurred during periods of social upheaval. For example, the Black Death of 1347 caused sharp population decline, and labor shortages gave some serfs opportunities to demand higher wages or flee to towns for freedom. The Crusades also provided some with chances to gain wealth and status through military achievements. However, these opportunities were extremely limited and often accompanied by enormous risks. The rigidity of the social hierarchy meant that the vast majority, like Edric, remained trapped in their birth positions. These exceptional cases, from Richard Neville's military machinations to Brother Lawrence's religious devotion to Joan of Arc's heroic leadership, reveal that medieval society was not entirely impermeable. However, their success required extraordinary talent, opportunity, and courage. These stories serve as both testimony to human resilience and reminders that the rule of birth determining destiny was almost unshakable at the time. When we look back at these rare breakthrough figures, we cannot help but wonder, how did medieval hierarchy influence modern society? Does its legacy still exist in today's inequalities? Let us continue exploring this question, examining the medieval legacy and its implications for the modern world. As we draw this journey through the harsh realities of medieval Europe to a close, it's time to reflect on how the rigid social hierarchy of that era continues to shape the world we live in today. The feudal system, with its unyielding divisions between kings, nobles, knights, clergy, and serfs, may seem like a distant memory, confined to history books and castle ruins. Yet, its legacy lingers in subtle and sometimes overt ways, influencing modern societies through persistent inequalities and the enduring question of whether birth still determines fate. In medieval Europe, the social order was a fortress of tradition, where one's role, whether to rule, fight, pray, or toil, was set at birth. Kings claimed divine right, nobles wielded power through land, knights fought for honor, clergy preached obedience, and serfs labored to sustain it all. Women, bound by both class and gender, faced even greater constraints, while rare individuals like William Marshall or Joan of Arc defied their prescribed roles through extraordinary effort. This system, justified by the Church's doctrine of the Great Chain of Being, was designed to maintain stability, but it came at the cost of freedom and opportunity for the vast majority. The transition from this rigid hierarchy to modern societies was neither swift nor simple. The Black Death in the 14th century disrupted the feudal order by creating labor shortages, empowering serfs to demand better wages and rights. The rise of trade and urban centers fostered a merchant class, challenging the dominance of land-based nobility. The Magna Carta in 1215 limited royal power, planting seeds for constitutional governance. The Renaissance and Enlightenment further eroded feudal ideals, promoting individualism, reason, and the notion that all people deserve equal opportunities. By the time of the French Revolution in 1789, cries of liberty, equality, fraternity signaled a decisive break from the old order, paving the way for democratic systems where, in theory, birth should not dictate destiny. Yet, despite these transformations, the shadow of feudalism persists. In many modern societies, socioeconomic status at birth continues to shape access to education, wealth, and opportunities. In the United States, for example, studies show that only 3 to 6% of families move from the bottom to the top income quintile over a decade, suggesting that social mobility is far from fluid. In the United Kingdom, socioeconomic background heavily influences educational attainment and career prospects, with children from affluent families more likely to attend elite schools and secure high-paying jobs. This echoes the medieval divide, where nobles passed their status to their heirs, while serfs remained bound to the land. Globally, the picture varies. The World Economic Forum's Global Social Mobility Index ranks countries like Denmark, Norway, and Finland as leaders in social mobility, thanks to robust welfare systems, universal health care, and accessible education. These nations demonstrate that policies can reduce the influence of birth on one's fate. In contrast, countries with higher inequality, such as South Africa and India, struggle to provide equal opportunities, reflecting a world where wealth and power remain concentrated among a few. The concept of neo-feudalism has emerged to describe modern systems that resemble medieval hierarchies. Today's corporate giants, billionaires, and political dynasties can be seen as modern equivalents of feudal lords, wielding disproportionate influence over resources and policy. For instance, the world's richest 1% hold more wealth than 6.9 billion people combined, a level of disparity that mirrors the concentration of land and power in medieval times. In some democracies, political power remains tied to family names or elite networks, reminiscent of hereditary titles. However, it's equally important to recognize the progress made since the Middle Ages. Legal frameworks now protect against discrimination based on birth, gender, or class in many parts of the world. Public education systems, though imperfect, offer pathways for advancement that were unimaginable for a medieval serf. Social welfare programs provide safety nets, reducing the extreme poverty that defined peasant life. The stories of individuals who rise from humble beginnings, entrepreneurs, activists, or leaders, echo the rare medieval exceptions, proving that change is possible, even if it remains challenging. On a broader scale, the legacy of colonialism can be viewed as a global extension of feudal principles, where powerful nations acted as lords over colonized territories, extracting resources and labor. While colonialism has largely ended, its economic and social impacts persist, shaping global inequalities that mirror medieval power dynamics. What can we learn from this enduring legacy? First, it reminds us that systems of power and privilege are resilient, adapting to new forms across centuries. The feudal lord's castle may have been replaced by corporate skyscrapers, but the concentration of wealth and influence remains a challenge. Second, it underscores the importance of vigilance in protecting and expanding opportunities for all. The medieval hierarchy was not overturned by chance, but through centuries of struggle, from peasant revolts to revolutionary ideals. As we reflect on this history, consider your own society. How does birth influence fate today? Are there modern-day serfs, bound not by land but by economic constraints? Are there barriers to education, employment, or justice that echo the medieval order? And what can we do to ensure that everyone has a fair chance to shape their own destiny? The philosopher Voltaire once said, "It is not enough to conquer, one must learn to seduce." To change a system, we must not only dismantle its inequities, but also build a new, more inclusive one in its place. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of medieval social hierarchy. I hope it has not only illuminated the past, but also inspired you to think critically about the present and the future we can create together.